Before we get into the show, we see a scene where Joro is talking to a girl with glasses, and we hear him say that it was the worst day of his life. To find out why he said this, we need to go back a bit in the events to understand what's happening. The show starts in the morning where we see Amatsu Kizureiji, who is also known as Joro, an ordinary high school student who is enthusiastically greeted by his classmate and childhood friend, Aoi Hinata, nicknamed Himawari. Both go to school together. Once there, another friend, Tiyuan Yuga, whom they call Sun, who plays baseball and is quite opposite of Joro, is introduced. Sun tells them he likes how things are between them, and Joro says he does too, hoping things will never change. But she gets angry and leaves. Sun concludes that things won't change for the better. After class, Sun says he'll go to baseball practice. At that moment, Sakura Akino, nicknamed Cosmos, the student council president, comes to fetch Joro, who is her secretary. Himawari gets jealous and argues with her, but ends up running away. Joro looks at her not understanding, and Teiyu tells him that the day will come when he realizes. Later in the council, Joro finishes his paperwork and Cosmos proposes they go out together on Saturday. He accepts, and she notes it in her notebook. Joro, now at home, fantasizes it gets a date with the president. Meanwhile, Himawari asks him out and decides to meet her on Sunday. The next day, Cosmos arrives with Joro and asks him if she looks good. He answers yes, and she blushes. They go to various places for coffee, shopping, a picnic. By the evening, they return home together. Joro thanks Cosmos for the food, but she says it was to thank him for his help on the student council. Cosmos asks him to sit down as she wants to tell him something. Joro thinks she's going to confess her feelings, but instead, she tells him she's in love with his friend's son and asks for his help in getting them together. She explains that she fell in love with him the first time she saw him lose a game, as he cheered everyone on even though he was hurt. After asking for his help, she leaves and tells him she'll see him on Monday. The next day, Joro goes to the movies with Himawari, after where we can see them stacking together, going to a sports store, and finally sitting on swings in a park. Himawari also has something to confess, and she asks him to sit next to her. She tells him exactly the same thing about Sun. Our protagonist can't believe it, as both girls have fallen in love with his friend. At night, Joro laments that he has been acting like a good guy all this time as his best friend ended up charming the two girls. He says that maybe he should behave as he truly is, and he decides to wait to be with the girl that his friend rejects. Apparently, our protagonist is a wolf in sheep's clothing. The next day, Joro walks and meets Himawari, who he internally now calls Easy because he thinks she used him to get close to his best friend. He explains that Cosmos also likes Sun, so he will support both and tries to tell her a strategy to captivate Sun. Once in class, they greet Sun and Joro sneaks away, saying he'll go to the council. Once in the council, Joro apologizes to Cosmos for calling her suddenly, whom he internally now calls a flirt for. Going after younger boys, he explains the situation with Himawari, and again says that he is an ally of both, but he has already thought of a strategy for her. They then talk to Sun, and she asks to be his friend. Joro invents that it's to get to know the boys from the lower grades as the council president. Later, Joro hides from Cosmos and Himawari, who are looking for him, and stays in the library. There he meets the girl from the beginning, Sugureko Senshoken, nicknamed Pansy. She is always there and tells him it's strange to see him there. She explains that she knows all about the love of those two girls for Sun and threatens to tell it, but he tries to pretend that he doesn't care. She says she has something to confess, and suddenly there's a bench, which surprises Joro. They sit there, and she confesses that she likes him, the real him. That is, she knows he's a wicked manipulator, and that's what she likes. Finally, they agree to meet there every day at break time, despite Joro not being too thrilled about it. After all, he appealed to the least attractive girl. The new day, and Joro arrives at the library to sit next to Pansy. She convinces him to tell her how he has been helping the girls, so we see how it went. Himawari decides to see a movie with Sun, and asks Joro to ask for her. He tries to refuse, but in the end he agrees. In class, he tries to convince Sun to go, but gives his ticket to Himawari as she seemed excited to go. Then Joro tells them to go together, and they agree. On the other hand, Cosmos has brought homemade food and again asks him to deliver it. Joro walks with Sun, who helps him carry books, and suddenly Cosmos appears with the food. But she gets nervous and starts talking like an old samurai. Therefore, Joro decides to force the situation, and in the end, he manages to convince Sun to eat with her. But Sun tries to invite Joro, and he makes up that he has a date and leaves. Joro tells Pansy that they are both very clumsy but try hard. Then she mentions that he's trying to match one of those two girls with his friend, but it hasn't occurred to him that his friend might indeed be in love with one. Then Joro thanks her, though he also insults her because he reiterates that he doesn't find her attractive. They both actually have foul mouths. She asks him in return for her help to be the one to decide who will inspect the library for the council's inspection. Later, Joro goes to see Sun, who is playing basketball, and asks if he likes someone. He asks him to go outside to tell him, and a bench magically appears again, letting Joro know that something bad is going to happen. They sit down and he confesses that he likes Pansy, leaving Joro unsure of what to do next. He asks for his help, but he refuses because if he helped, the other two girls would be angry with him. In the evening, he meets Sang Shoku and asks her what she thinks of his friend. She gets angry and tells him she only wants to be with Joro. Those who see the scene misinterpret it as a confession, and suddenly Sun appears. He is surprised to see them together because Joro said they were not friends. Then Pansy said, as they talked about a library review and that they really don't get along. After this, she leaves. Having cleared up, Sun also leaves and Joro picks up the cookies she had made for him. Afterward, a message from Cosmos arrives for Joro, asking him to meet her at a cafe. Cosmos explains that Sun has asked her for help in wooing Pansy, all upset blaming Joro for not warning her and telling her to go after that girl. Majuro had not said that at any time, but Sun misunderstood him. Cosmos doesn't believe him and says she's going to help Sun, calling him cruel and a liar. Then a message from Himawari, and the next day he meets her, and exactly the same thing happens. Sun told her everything and he tries to explain it, but Himawari doesn't believe him and leaves, calling him cruel and a liar. On Monday, Joro goes to talk to Pansy as she says the best is yet to come, and at that moment all his friends appear at the door. The boys start rebuking Joro for lying to them, but he denies it and says that he did everything he could to help them. No one believes him, so Joro explodes and tells them that in reality they just used him as a tool and were selfish with him. Joro does well and expects them to apologize, but then Pansy interrupts and tells the truth, that he was waiting to stay with one of them and try to pair her with Sun. Sun can't believe it and hits Joro to such a degree that it knocks him down, then picks him up and takes him away, saying that they will no longer be friends. The girl had been watching everything, so the news spread, and a week later everyone started to ignore and mistreat him. One day, Pansy calls Joro on the phone, telling him that if he doesn't come to see her, something bad will happen. Joro arrives at the library where he sees Pansy, and she asks him to look for a book before they talk together. Then while he is searching, Sun appears. Joro observes and listens to them. It turns out that Sun had set a trap for Joro to keep him away from the two girls, used them to turn Joro against him, and therefore made up everything. Pansy realized and asked him why he played along, and she says it was to expose him. Afterward, Pansy asks him his motive for away, and it turns out that years ago he liked a girl, but she only wanted Joro, so he wanted to get back at him by hurting him with his two friends and mocking his feelings. However, Pansy explains that Joro was helping Sun all the time, not just the two girls, and she explains that precisely for that reason, she fell in love with him. When Sun was crying about losing the match, Joro was waiting for him outside with his favorite food to cheer him up. Later, Sun threatens to harm Pansy, but she says she has faith that something will rescue her. Then Joro comes out of his hiding place and confronts him, saying that he can't make fun of Himawari and Kazuma's feelings, as they tried very hard for him, and forces him to go and apologize. Sun asks what he will do, and Joro replies that he'll manage. Afterward, Pansy asks him to come back one day to see her, but he refuses and leaves. After that, the two girls come out of their hiding place, having heard everything. The new day, and Joro decides to check his locker, and there's Kazuma's, who prevented his shoes from being painted. Upon arriving in class, Himawari also protects his table from being scratched, and in the end, Sun interrupts the class and apologizes for what happened. Later, Joro meets Pansy, and she is very happy that he had returned to tell her everything. She makes the decision to unbutton her shirt and let down her hair, which reveals that she is the girl that Joro was captivated by on the day of the match, and in the end, he decides that he will go to see her since she is the only girl who wants him. Days later, Joro is with Pansy, who baked him some delicious cupcakes. Then, Joro tells her that she has been very kind to him and that he wants something in return. She offers him her shoes to clean, but obviously, what he wants is to be able to see her, as he is tired of only seeing her as a messy, glasses-wearing girl. She tells him that she can't because someone is pursuing her, which we don't know if it was just a joke or not, and also she does not like the reason why he is coming to see her. He is lonely. She tells him that he should make peace with his friends and gives him some wise advice. He asks if she speaks from personal experience. She looks embarrassed and doesn't say much. In the end, he takes a cupcake and compliments her. Later, Joro goes to the class thinking about who he will talk to first, and suddenly, Hina Hanatachi, nicknamed Asumero, appears asking him about the flower festival since she is a member of the journalism club, and tells him that the flower dance will be interesting. In this, 3 girls dance with a boy, and the rumor is that one of them will marry him. He says that they will surely choose her in Himawari, who is struggling with exams. She asks for help, and Asumero offers to assist, but Joro sees his chance and approaches the girls. Himawari runs away but falls down the stairs, hurting her bottom. She tries to escape again, he stops her, they argue because both want to reconcile, and in the end, Joro asks to be friends again, and she agrees and hugs him while he smiles. Afterwards, they appear on the rooftop with Sun, who asks why they sent him a challenge letter. Realizing it's a trick by Joro, he refuses, but the latter gathers courage and asks him to be friends again. Sun is going to refuse out of pride, but in the end, he agrees and they all become friends again. On the other hand, we see that Cosmos has been stalking them from afar all the time. Joro goes to the library and tells Pansy that he managed to reconcile with his friends. She tells him she'll help them all study together if he promises to take her somewhere outside of school afterward. Plus, she mentions that someone else is coming, to which Joro is surprised because he thinks everyone is already there. He's forgetting about Cosmos. After talking to Asunaro about the flower dance, he realizes that Cosmos is watching him because he had forgotten about her, and he goes in search of her. She is sitting on the stairs, regretting having been following him and waiting to reconcile. He tries to fix it, but she tells him it seems like he's angry, that the real Joro would be kinder and imitates him. So he agrees and they reconcile. Later, they all go to the library and Pansy is glad that Joro finally reconciled with everyone. Then they start to study. Cosmos explains math and Pansy language, and our protagonist ends up completely exhausted. As the girls leave, they tell Pansy that the cookies were delicious and chat happily. Then Himawari challenges Sun to have the best grades. Meanwhile, Joro looks tired from studying, but no, he's actually very happy that the reconciliation went well, because now he can fantasize again about being with all three girls. In the end, we see a girl from the journalism club looking at a newspaper that talks about a victim. Days later, Himawari runs into Joro on his way to class, and she thanks him because both she and Sun passed their exams. Then she hits him in a friendly manner, but he tells her to stop hitting him. However, she replies that she will continue to do so because they are best friends, and hugs his arm, making Joro smile. Later, after class is in, Asunaro asks Joro to meet her on the rooftop. Once there, Asunaro tells him that she's fascinated by Joro. Another bench appears. Those cursed benches again. They confess things to him. It seems like she loves him, but she ends up telling him that he's a danger to women, that she's been observing him since the game a year ago, and she saw how he made a perverted face while looking at a girl's panties. She also shows him photos with the girls where it seems like they are more than friends, and she tells him that this situation would only happen to Joro of a romantic comedy. Then she tells him that she'll publish an article in the newspaper describing him as a perverted monster who deceives girls. Fortunately, as our protagonist vehemently denies it, she tells him she won't publish it if he lets her follow him and ensure that he doesn't have a relationship with the girls. Then she begins to follow him and they run into Cosmos. She tells him that he has been chosen for the dance and the girls will be Cosmos Kamada, a first-year girl, and Himawari, so she's looking forward to dancing with him. Again, Asunaro calls him a pervert and accuses him of manipulating the girls. Later, Joro meets all his friends in the library and asks the girls not to hang out him too much, but they refuse, so he says he won't spend more time than necessary until after the dance. Even so, Cosmos asks him to accompany her to talk to Kamada about the dance, and he ends up agreeing. When they go to talk to Kamada about the dance, we see that Cosmos behaves like a samurai to prevent Asunaro from writing anything bad about our protagonist. Unfortunately, once they get to Kamada, she refuses because he is known as a perverted shoelicker. Since Kamada has declined to dance, the president tells Joro that she has found the substitute, though it seems Asunaro wanted to join. When he gets to his friends, it turns out they spoke with the teacher to have Sun also participate. Sun jokes that he will see what happens if they end up together in the dance. Then we see the girls changing and the days pass while they all search for costumes together and practice for the dance. One day in class, Joro confronts some girls who seem to be the most popular. They bring a defamatory article, as already been published. Cosmos comes to his defense, raising suspicions that she might be one of the girls in the article. Asakama Yama, nicknamed Sasankwa, threatens him for playing the girls' hearts, but Asunaro appears and tells them that he's still on trial and it's uncertain whether he is truly a pervert, asking them to wait until after the dance. The girls agree but tell Joro that if he ends up hurting a girl, that will go after him. Cosmos speaks with him and tells him that they will no longer practice and will stay away from him so no one will wrongly suspect them. Later, they meet in a library and she tells him that neither Sun nor Himawari will see them until the dance so that he won't bother. Then Asunaro appears and insists they practice together for the dance. Could it be that Asunaro is falling for our Joro, who always wanted girls to fall for him? A week has passed. The day of the festival is finally approaching and Joro realizes that Asunaro has been by his side all this time and blushes. She tells him that the newspaper will be published tomorrow, but just then, Sun calls him and explains that the parents have complained about there being another boy in the dance, so he will not be able to participate. Therefore, Joro asks Asunaro to be a substitute and she agrees. Then they decide to look for Cosmos, but she was already there. She asks to speak with Asunaro alone, but the reporter refuses, so all three of them end up going to the council. Once there, Cosmos says she will not allow Asunaro to join the dance because she manipulated the whole school so that she would be the one dancing with him. She spread rumors about Joro's fetishes to make Kamada resign and printed the newspapers to inform the parents and get rid of Sun. She then tried to forge the registry where it shows she had used the printer for the newspapers. All this while they were meeting in a library and she was in the journalism club. Cosmos explains that Asunaro initially planned to isolate Joro from the rest with the article, but after learning about the dance, her goal was to dance with him because she really wanted to be his partner and believed the dance would bring them together. Asunaro has no choice but to confess and admit she wants to be with him, but he's always with other girls. She fell in love with him at the match because he stopped a ball that was about to hit her, though she doesn't know that was because our guide moved to get a better look at pansies. Cosmos tells her that pushing him away from his friends will not achieve what she wants. Then she asks her what she will do, and Ashinuro asks Joro to forgive her, that she truly loves him and wants to be with him. But Joro angrily tells her he can't allow her to harm his friends, that Sun lost time in his baseball training and the others also invested effort and she wanted to ruin everything. The girl accepts this very seriously. Cosmos asks her to change the article and she says she will and leaves. Cosmos talks to Joro and acknowledges having acted as the villain so the girl wouldn't feel bad about herself. Then she tells him that from the start, Sun wasn't going to dance, but they were training his partner, who is obviously Pansy, whom they convinced to participate. At that moment, Pansy enters in a red dress, although we don't see her face. The night arrives and the flower dance finally begins. First, we see Kamawari and Joro dancing. In the middle of the dance, she asks him if he likes anyone. He answers no, and she says doesn't either, as she's already forgotten about Sun. Afterwards, she leaves and Cosmos appears, who everyone cheers, and they perform a very intense and romantic dance. She tells him not to worry about Asunaro because she's already changing the article. Then Cosmos tells him she will give him a reward for all he has done for her, and when the lights go out, she kisses him on the cheek, making Joro blush, and tells him that she felt very lonely this week without being together. Finally, Pansy appears, whom no one recognizes, but this does not make them nervous. As they dance, she asks him if she looks good, and he tells her it's obvious. Then Pansy asks him why he's always helping others, since he made up excuses to bring her together with his friends both for studying and during breaks, and he simply says he wanted her to also have friends. At the end of the dance, Pansy tells everyone that she had a lot of fun and asks them to continue being her friends, and they respond that they already are, which makes Pansy happy. The next day, our protagonist wakes up and greets his mother. She asks him if he's going out with his friends on his day off. He wonders how she knows, and his mother, nicknamed Laurel, tells him Pansy told her, who is already seated on the couch. Joro becomes nervous when Pansy greets him. They all have breakfast together, and his mother explains that she ran into Pansy in front of the house with one of the books from her favorite movie, and they started talking, ending up with Pansy being invited inside. Pansy reminds him about the tickets for the water park, and he says that after breakfast they will go. They all arrive at the pool, and Joro is excited with his first. We see Humori, who according to Joro is adorable. Cosmos with a flattering bikini, and finally Pansy with a provocative bikini. After this, we see everyone going to the pool and having fun playing and going down the slides. Joro loses at rock, paper, scissors, and it's his turn to go get drinks, where he meets Sasenkwa, the girl who threatened him when the newspaper was published. She has her hair tied up so our protagonist doesn't recognize her. The girl starts to feel bad about treating him like that and asks for advice to make amends. He tells her that an apology is enough despite her thinking it's too little. During the conversation, Joro comes across as a sincere and good guy, so it seems like another girl has fallen in love. At the end, she asks what he thinks about dyed hair, and he replies that he likes long black hair. Afterward, Joro takes the drinks and leaves, and not without receiving a drink gifted by the girl. Joro arrives with the others, and the girls argue, each asking Joro to accompany them to do things together. But Joro says he can do everything. They take it as a competition, the prize being that they can give Joro any order. First, we see Joro going down the slide of Himawari. He enjoys it with a perverted face, but when they go down, his swimsuit ends up on her head, leaving him behind. Luckily for Joro, Sasenkwa jumps into the pool and covers him, helping him out. Afterward, it's Cosmo's turn and her dolphin. She asks him to ride together, but when she gets on, she gets excited thinking about how romantic it is and pushes him. Joro ends up alone on the dolphin while she fantasizes, and Sun appears again and sits with him, cheering him on. Finally, it's Pansy's turn, who asks him to go to the hot springs together. She thanks him again for introducing her to his friends, and he thanks her for helping him make amends with his friends because now he gets along even better with them. She tells him that she is glad because now she doesn't have to buy books to reconcile or pay fortune tellers. Thus, she tells Joro that she's been stalking him all the time, and that's why she knows everything about him, even where he keeps his magazines, because she found them the last time his mother invited her to his house. Increasingly feels worse, and again, Sun appears and makes Joro feel better. At the end of the day, they ask Joro to choose who he had the most fun with out of the three, but Joro says the one he had the most fun with was Sun because he saved him from all the uncomfortable situations. Then he invites him to his house as his best friend, and they leave together. The next day in class, Joro remembers the day before while looking at the photos and feels calm seeing that the misunderstandings have been resolved, and some girls appear apologize for accusing him of the supposed newspaper note. Now, the aforementioned girls are happy to see that he is good because a girl already confirmed it. That same girl walks in and sits next to Joro. He is excited seeing that she is the type of girl he likes, but it turns out she is Sasenkwa, who already changed her hair color to black. Class begins, and there is a new girl before introducing herself to the others. She walks directly towards Joro and kisses his hand. Moreover, she says she is going to serve him. What's going on? Joro's memories take us back to the famous baseball game a year ago, where we see the moment he went to buy food for Sun, who was sad after losing. Our protagonist asks the girl at the stand for all the skewers. She would surprise the girl, but also pleads her because she wasn't making much money that day. As he was saying goodbye, the girl asked him for his name. After the opening, we return to the scene where Joro's hand is kissed by the same girl from the stand, whose name is Chiharu Yoki, nicknamed Tsubaki. She introduces herself to the class as the daughter of the family that runs the cheerful skewer stand, and Sun is excited, finally remembering her at that moment. Of course, the other girls in his class are upset with Jorah. Next, she introduces herself to the classmates and explains why she is indebted to Jorah. Himewari takes notes, saying she will tell Pansy and Cosmos, while Sun congratulates him on his good behavior. Ash and Arrow is outside, watching everything. Tsubaki tells Jorah that she will do anything for him, but he refuses. Tsubaki asks Sasenkwa if she also wants to serve Jorah, to which she naturally says no. Tsubaki then asks if she can help with any stalker issues, but he says there's no need, and she returns to her seat as the professor arrives. Between scenes, we see Jorah thinking it's not normal for Tsubaki to suddenly appear and want to serve him. This implies that she's plotting something more sinister, and he wants to find out what it is. Later, Jorah asks Tsubaki if she needs anything from him, hoping to uncover her hidden desires. However, she tells him she would be happy just serving him, which touches him and he goes along with her. Tsubaki saves him from slipping on a banana peel and invites him to eat together, which he accepts as he forgot his lunch. Later, everyone is in the library and Tsubaki introduces herself to Cosmos and Pansy. They begin to eat and Cosmos can't resist and wants Jorah to eat some of her food, but just then Tsubaki gives him the food she had promised. Cosmos tries to hide her food, but everyone already saw it, so she makes up an excuse. Understanding the situation, Jorah asks her for some of her food. Later, Himawari shows her racket and talks with Sun about pushing harder in the near matches. Later, Pansy asks Jorah to stay alone with her and tells him that it is not okay to accept food from both girls. He needs to make a choice and stop running away. However, he tells her that he wants to use the situation as an excuse. Then she asks him to read a book. Then he tells her he needs to go do something he usually does each year. We see Jorah leaving the sports store and Himawari appears, throwing herself at him as always, knocking him to the ground. She tells him her birthday is coming up soon. He says he doesn't care, but she says she is eagerly anticipating the day. Later, Jorah realizes he left his backpack open and the book that Pansy had lent him fell out. He decides to go back to where he crossed paths with Himawari because that's when it must have fallen out. Staying in his search, two girls, Momo Sakurabara and Runa Kusumi, decide to help him. They eventually find it, but it's all worn out, so Jorah asks them where he could buy another one. They tell them it's quite expensive, which scares him. The next day, everyone is gathered in the library and Jorah is looking for a job to pay for the book. Meanwhile, Cosmos takes out her lunchbox, which this time has an extra tier. She waits for Jorah to notice, but he keeps looking at jobs and Tsubaki tells him he could work for her family since they're looking for someone and they pay well. He agrees and asks Pansy to talk later. He eventually talks to her and explains what happened, and she tells him it's a shame, but he doesn't need to work. She'd rather spend time with him. However, Jorah insists and tells her that he will work until he can buy her a new book and return the old one when he's finished. Night comes, and we see Jorah working with Tsubaki, who are teaching him his duties. He thanks them, and she tells him that this way she can truly repay his favor. Jorah tells us that he has been working at the pork skewer restaurant for a week and has started to get used to it. After the opening, Tsubaki congratulates him because he is doing very well. But he says he doesn't deserve any praise because everyone is better, he's just a secondary character, which surprises Tsubaki. The next day, Jorah walks to school, happy not to encounter Himawari because she has to train for her tennis match. But she appears and makes an excuse to accompany him. She sees the book and asks why he is reading it in its current condition and not buying another one, so Jorah decides to distract her by talking about the birthday gift he bought her. In the library, Pansy is still angry because Jorah is working instead of spending time together, but Son of Cosmos acknowledges his effort and Tsubaki tells her that as soon as he gets the money for what he wants to buy, he will work less and return to the library. Night comes and Sisengwa visits them, pretending not to know he's working there, saying she might come back another day. Then Jorah trips over a man and spills his beer on him, who gets angry and pay for the dry cleaning. Jorah becomes sad and returns home. On the way home, he runs into Pansy, who's dressed in her real outfit. She tells him she dressed this way to talk to the real Jorah, telling him it bothers her that this time he is working not to help others, but for himself to feel better because he's not doing anything while all his friends are. He confirms that she's right and gets angry, saying he wants to be able to do something. But she tells him he doesn't need to push himself so hard, he's already a good person and he has her, who loves him more than he can imagine. He doesn't listen, and in the end he sends her away, only to realize he was too harsh. The next day in the library, Himawari talks about the upcoming match and everyone supports her. Jorah relaxes, but then she asks if he finished reading the worn-out book and he replies that he still has a bit left to read. She understands that he didn't finish it because he was waiting for a new one, and she leaves. Sun talks to him and tries to tell him to put his pride aside and fight for the things he really wants in order for things to go well. Later, Jorah goes to work and Tsubaki realizes he is sad, so she lets him leave early to think. Jorah goes to the park and meets a boy, Hazuki Yasu, nicknamed Hose, who offers to talk for a while after seeing him in that state. Jorah explains the situation and the boy gives him the same advice as Sun, to focus on what really matters and to make things right with Pansy. Then they introduce themselves and shake hands. The next day, Jorah decides to talk to Pansy, apologizes for taking his frustration out on her and telling her the truth, and tells her he will keep working to be able to return her book. This time, Pansy encourages him. Later, we see Joro happily working for several days, even getting along with the man he bumped into. At the end, Tsubaki gives him his salary and he happily goes to buy the book, but when he arrives, he is informed that someone had bought it before him. On his way, he meets Hama Warui, who shows him that she bought the book to give it as seeing that it was important to him. He gets angry at first because she set aside her club and spent the money she had been saving for her new tennis racket on the book. Joro gets mad at her because he didn't want her to neglect what she loves doing the most. She starts crying because she thinks she bothered him despite having good intentions, and he realizes this and comforts her by saying he is indeed happy that she bought the book for him and hugs her. Finally, the day of the match arrives and we see Hama Warui. She asks Joro again if he likes anyone and he says no, but now she responds that she does like someone and gives him a kiss on the cheek as a reward for having gifted her the racket and goes to play. Later, they all go together to toast the match at the skewer place. Pansy asks him how he liked the book, and it turns out that inside it was a bookmark asking if he would help her when she has problems. He replies yes and goes back to helping Tsubaki with the dishes. She thanks him for staying to help her and he tells her it's the least he can do for her help. Then she confesses to him that her real goal now is to help him realize that he is the protagonist of his own story, so he shouldn't get discouraged and have low self-esteem, and Joro agrees and says that everyone is a protagonist, not just him. Just then we see a scene where a girl makes him sit on a bench again to ask for his help in getting Sun and Pansy together. Same old shit, just different day. The next day, Joro arrives at school, but suddenly someone grabs and pulls his arm. It's Kamada Kimi introducing herself as the idol Tampopo, the girl who once told him that she didn't want to dance with him because she liked licking shoes. She makes him sit on a bench and tells him that she saw Sun and Pansy looking at each other during the famous match day and thought they would look good together. She became the team manager and wants to help bring them together because if Sun is happy and wins, he'll become more famous and her fame as an idol will explode. Seeing that he's trying to refuse, she offers him suggestive photos of herself, which leads him to accept. Then Ashinero appears, who had been observing them, and tells Tampopo that she will help by writing an article about her. Tampopo is excited, but she doesn't realize that Ashinero's plan is to eliminate a rival. Later in the library, Ashinero and Cosmos feel uncomfortable due to the argument they had last time. Then Ashinero pulls Joro out of there, telling him that she got what he had asked for. Later, Sisenqua tries to ask Joro to go somewhere together, but she can't muster the courage and tells him to do well at work instead. Tampopo brings Joro and Ashinero together and tells them that she has a plan for Sun and Pansy to end up together. To make Sun jealous by having Joro hug Pansy, he refuses initially but ends up accepting. Later, he sees Pansy alone and via an earpiece. Tampopo gives him instructions to approach and compliment Pansy. But Pansy notices the earpiece and Joro tries to pretend otherwise. The other girls arrive and say that they've all agreed to decide on a day to hang out together. On the stairs, some boys talk about how pretty Pansy is, then try to remember Tampopo's name. But they mistakenly call her Pispopo, which angers her. She starts yelling and Joro decides to take off the earpiece and leave while Tampopo yells angrily. The idol, Ashinero, and Joro meet again and Joro decides to confess to Pansy as part of the plan. Once in the court, he tells the idol that he has no intention of confessing since he has figured out that her goal is not to get Sun a girlfriend, but to get Pansy a boyfriend, since she was the one who fascinated him that day. Then Ashinero appears and corroborates his story. Pansy arrives and greets Tampopo, recognizing her as an old friend, which makes Tampopo nervous. Joro tells her she didn't need to lie to him because she could have just told him the truth since it's Pansy. However, Tampopo leaves embarrassed without saying anything else and Pansy explains that her friend didn't want to expose her because she knows she had bad experiences with boys. He shows interest and asks if she got a boyfriend before, but she just thanks him for his concern. They almost have a romantic moment, but Ashinero interrupts it out of jealousy and starts arguing with Pansy. Later, Joro tries to escape, but Pansy replaces the suggestive photo of Tampopo with one of herself. He prefers the new photo and leaves happily. Later, we see the president Cosmos talking to the director about the library. It seems they are going to close it. Later on, Joro is walking in the school drooling over Pansy's photo, who suddenly appears in front of him. She tells him that Tampopo has calmed down and comes close to him, suggesting that he can make advances whenever he wants. Joro realizes that this isn't like her and notices the earpiece, revealing that Tampopo is telling her what to say, and Joro shouts that nothing has changed about the idol. As Pansy gets closer, making him nervous, he shouts for an angel to save him, calling out to Tampopo and scolding her for the embarrassment she caused. Then Cosmos appears and announces that the library will be closed. Everyone gathers in the library and decides to talk to the people they know to attract more visitors to the library so it won't be closed. Feeling useless because he doesn't have more friends, Joro is advised by the girls to go home and think of a plan. On his way, he runs into Hose and asks for his help as Hose was the one who helped him last time. Hose mentions that the same thing happened at his school last year and he helped solve it, so he agrees to help. The next day, Joro and Cosmos wait at the school gate for Hose, who expresses his concern. His school was the one that defeated Sun. The others reassure him that Sun accepted his help. Hose, along with Cherry and Tsukimi, the two girls who helped Joro find his lost book, also show up. Joro recognizes them and they introduce themselves. Once in the library, Hose starts to introduce himself, but Pansy reacts with fear. This makes Joro nervous and Cherry and Tsukimi reveal that they were in the same middle school. They then begin discussing their plans of Hose capturing everyone's attention with his perfect smile, making him seem like the true protagonist of a romantic comedy. Pansy hides behind Joro, and they decide to get started. Then Cherry and Tsukimi try to arrange for Pansy to show Hose around the library alone, but Joro, seeing Pansy's discomfort, offers to give Hose the library tour himself. Joro observes Hose and acknowledges that he is a good guy, hence not understanding Pansy's reaction. Then Tsukimi asks him in a peculiar way if he likes Pansy, to which he replies no and leaves. Later, we see everyone working hard with Joro trying to help but ends up causing more trouble than help, spilling everything. As night falls, everyone leaves school, encouraged by Hose's words about the progress being a result of everyone's collective efforts. As they start saying their goodbyes and again try to arrange for Hose to go home with Pansy, Joro thinks of how to help, but Ashen Arrows sees the situation and asks Pansy to accompany her home, a gesture Pansy is grateful for. The following day, Joros, Cosmos, and Hamawari meet Cherry and Tsukimi at a cafe. There the girls confess that they are both in love with Hose, but they prioritize friendship over love and want him to be happy with Pansy, the girl he loves. They try to persuade Joro and the girls to help them bring Hose and Pansy together, but Joro senses something off, and despite their insistence, he refuses and the girls follow suit. Finally, Joro talks to Pansy and she tells him about how she was popular in high school because she never had her true self. Hose fell in love with her and the girls who loved him tried to force her to be with him, but she refused. Nevertheless, he decided to stay by her side, suppressing his feelings. Her conclusion is that being overly kind sometimes causes harm, like in the current situation where Hose is so good that the two girls hide their feelings and try to make him happy. Joro asks Pansy if she likes Hose and she says no. Therefore, Joro decides to help her resolve this situation and she is relieved and decides to help as well. Later on, we see Sun talking to Pansy about finally getting his chance. Does he hold any ill intentions? Days pass and the library began to receive more visits than ever before, indicating that the danger has been evaded. However, the problem still revolved around Hose. Joro witnessed Cherry and Tsukimi continuing to suggest that Hose should date Pansy, making her uncomfortable, but Sun intervened seeking Joro's help with the book. It became clear to Joro that they needed to take action soon. Later, Joro spoke to Tampopo about what transpired. She grew nervous at the thought of Hose being at school, revealing that she was actually in love with him. That's why she also wanted Pansy to have a partner. Then Joro talked to Hose in the library about how he managed to attract many people there. Joro asked Hose how he would react if Pansy found a boyfriend. Hose responded that he would be sad, but would like to see her happy. With determination, Joro mustered all their courage and requested to speak in front of everyone. However, at that moment, Pansy informed him that she had already agreed to go out with Sun. Sun had asked her to be together if he won the last match, and she accepted because she couldn't date someone who didn't even look at her or respect her, like Joro. Pansy then told him not to return to the library because he hadn't been helpful to her or the library at any moment. Devastated, Joro left. Later, Joro talked to Sun, who confirmed that he and Pansy were together because of Joro's help. Sun explained that Joro had acted as he should, and he asked Joro to act as a true best friend should. Joro was luck-shattered and began working every night. He revealed that he had returned to the library, and despite being surrounded by beautiful girls, something didn't feel right. At the Hamawari restaurant, Cosmos and Aso Nero commented that the library had been saved thanks to him. However, he denied it and stated that it was thanks to Hose. They insisted that he should return to the library. They mentioned that Pansy had been lonely since he left, but he refused and walked away. Stesenkwa had been observing everything. Later, Joro talked to Tsubaki, who also insisted that he should go to the library. He mentioned that Sun was with Pansy now and had asked him not to go to the library. Tsubaki reminded him that even though she was with Sun, she was still in danger from Hose. Joro finally realized that Sun meant it was now his turn to help as a best friend, which was why Pansy had asked him to leave for a while. Tsubaki explained that Pansy simply wanted to protect him because he had been the one most involved in the situation, being friends with both of them. With this realization, Joro finally decided to take action. As he left, Joro encountered Sisenkwa, who handed him a can of cold cocoa. She asked him to trust her and encouraged him to return to his usual self. He put on a twisted face and she was glad before leaving. The next afternoon, Joro spoke to Sun and told him that he wouldn't be able to attend his match because he had to go help Pansy, which was more important. Sun understood and seemed even happy about it. In the library, everyone discussed how the situation had improved. Hose decided to ask Pansy out, telling her to consider him if Sun lost the match. Pansy grew nervous and the girls tried to help her, but Cherry and Tsukimi silenced them, telling them to think about Hose's feelings. Just then, Oro appeared and interrupted their conversation, telling Pansy that he had returned after some time as she had requested. Pansy blessed in response. Juro then discussed the privileges of being a woman, setting the book by Natsu Sosaki, and mentioned that Pansy's privilege was being a beautiful woman who got bored, manipulated men, and needed attention. This showed that unlike Hose, he understood the hidden sides of people. Pansy blushed and smiled with joy. Hose expressed his happiness at Juro's return but was angered by the interruption. Juro challenged him to a competition, with Cherry and Tsukimi trying to prevent him from interfering. Thanks to Pansy's intervention, Juro convinced Hose to accept the challenge. Juro informed him that the loser would stop talking to Pansy forever and couldn't retract. The situation became complicated for our protagonists. The challenge involved each of the 6 girls having a hairpin similar to Pansy's obtained from Tampopo and giving their hairpins to the person they believed was the best match for Pansy. They would do this at the baseball finalist stadium, with each school's victory determining how many points the corresponding guy would receive to avoid any possible ties. Confident that he would win as he had chosen this challenge knowing he had an advantage, Juro didn't mind playing dirty to get what he wanted. However, Cosmos, Asanaro, and Hamawari asked to hand over their hairpins immediately. Juro accepted, thinking they would give them to him. But to his surprise, it all gave their hairpins to Hose. It couldn't be. They explained that as rivals of Pansy, they couldn't allow her to win, which is why they wanted Hose to win. One by one, they confessed their love for Juro, and Pansy was happy to see that they were her true friends. She encouraged Juro, who declared that he would find a way to win. Hose told Juro that they couldn't be friends anymore, and Juro vowed not to let him have Pansy, since this is how his harem will be complete.